Art. Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the February 3rd, 2024 Lake Washington School Board Study Session. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. The first agenda item for today is going to be our board self-assessment. We have Tricia Lubach here from the Washington State School Directors Association, who's going to help lead our discussion today. Tricia, can I turn it over to you? Or okay.
Yes. It's a Saturday morning, and here you all are at 8 o'clock. So thank you so much for leading into the work. I really appreciate it. I have met most of you. Some of you I've worked with before, and some of you I haven't. So I'll just give a little bit of background about myself. So I've been with WASDA for 10 years. 18 years of school board experience. Oh, did I not turn it on?
We're good now.
It's a little trick I use. Yes. Yeah, broadcasting. So in addition to my time at WASDA working with boards all over the state and leading training, I also have 18 years of school board experience. So I understand all the challenges that you face, or a lot of them anyway. Many of them are unique. And also, the joys of being a school director as well. So we are going to take, I think we've got 3 hours to do this morning, right? Until 11. We're going to just take some time to do something that you don't get to do very often, which is actually just talk with each other. Spend some time talking with each other, really getting to know each other in terms of where you are. Because I know two of you are new, right? Lisa and Lindsay, you're both new. Yeah, I remembered. And so we'll be going through the board self-assessment, but you'll have plenty of time to just sort of reflect on things, see where you all want to go forward. So I would love it if you'd just take a moment to introduce yourself to me, if you wouldn't mind. What do you want to tell me? What brought you to this work?
Well, hi. I'm Lindsay. This is my son, Porter, who is joining us today. And I have been an educator for 15 years, and my first teaching career was actually in this district. So I have been an employee here. I have been the co-founder and co-director of a nonprofit private school that was really focused on inclusion, equity, kind of more forward-thinking in what the whole system of education can look like. So I'm here because I feel that experience can be pretty valuable to bigger ideas in this district. And I have my son here who is in 5th grade, and I have another son who is in 7th grade. So we're kind of right at that preteen age.
You are.
And we have a puppy too, but I did not bring mine.
Could have been a puppy fest today. So, good morning, Eric.
Hey, Eric Law Liberty. I've been on the board for 8 years. I have two kids, one in 1st grade, that's what he's in, and then a preschooler.
Oh, great.
That's enough for me.
Those are busy years.
Yeah.
They are also busy when they're preteens and teenagers. So, great. Thank you, Eric.
Hi, Leah Choi. I've been on the board. This is now going into my 3rd year. I've got 2 kids, a 2nd grader and a kindergartner. So similar to, I guess, what Eric is experiencing.
1 year behind.
1 year behind. Yeah.
Thank you. Morning, Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Stewart. I've been on the board for over 10 years now.
These are on really loud.
Okay, I'll back up. I always knew Stewart didn't need a microphone. I have 2 sons. My younger son has autism, and that's what propelled me really to the board, helping the families with disabilities and kind of representing the have-nots, if you will, at times.
Great. Thank you.
I'm Lisa Guthrie. I was appointed in August and then elected for my first term in November, so I beat Lindsay by 3 months. So I'm not the newbie. Very proud of that. I My day job, I work at Microsoft, and I've been there for 20-plus years, and then I've got 4 kids as well, 3rd grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. Yeah, I guess what propelled me to this work, just seeing 4 kids with very different needs going through the system, and seeing where those needs were met really well, and where maybe not so much, and feeling like I could make a difference at a broader level.
Wonderful, thank you. So, yeah, commonality between all of you is really just, your own experience as a parent brought you into the work, and we have them all the way down to preschool, all the way up to kids preschool, and kids who have graduated already, and then everything in between. So I think it's really nice to have that span of experience on a school board, because you can see it from before it even starts until after it's over. And of course, things change over the years too. My guess is that Lake Washington's a different school district in many ways than it was when your kids were in school. That's true for me. My kids are in their 20s, and when I started, they were 4 and 8, and the school system looks different than it did back then. So, well, we're going to dive in. One of the things I'd like you to do is think about what are some values that you bring to the work. And so if you want to just write them down on your notepad, it can be one word. It could be a couple words, a phrase. If you want to do a few words, you can. If you want to just write one thing down, and we're going to share them out. So I always like to warn people, you'll be sharing these out. But what are the values you bring to this work? It will not be passed around. You'll say it out loud. You can record it in whatever way works best for you. Or if you have a good memory, you can just keep it up there.
Oh, the audio's on the TV. That's fun.
What does that mean?
So we're going to hear ourselves very faintly about 30 seconds after we say everything. That's why I keep it on.
Yeah, probably was. Well, that'll be fun. We will be hearing voices. Yes, it's actually the way it goes. I love puzzles. I might have to go over there and join him here. I don't get to do them very often, so. All right, go ahead and wrap up what you're writing. So we're going to just go around the table, just share one, your first one, or if that's all you have is one, you can read that whole thing, and we'll go around until they are exhausted. So, Eric, would you mind starting?
Sure. Just one.
Sure, to start
Okay.
with.
Well, I have two categories. I did personal values, and also like and then also community. I guess
Okay.
that I think about.
Great.
I'll start with personal. I wrote optimism. That's something I try to bring.
That is
Particularly this morning when I was leaving to come here.
yes, at 7:30 on a Saturday morning.
yeah.
Good job.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for bringing the optimism today. We appreciate it. Lindsay, how about you?
Laugh at that. Curiosity.
Love for the community, for one another, for the staff in the district, that we work closely, and the staff distributed across the schools, just for the whole system.
Thank you.
Inquisitiveness. I was taught to ask questions that everyone would understand.
Inclusiveness.
No, inquisitive
Oh, inquisitiveness. Sorry, I misunderstood you.
question.
Inquisitiveness. Nice.
I didn't have a single word, but I said a firm belief in the value of education for everyone, for their future success.
Great. Okay, Eric. Another one?
I wrote discipline.
Advocacy for all students.
Okay.
Integrity.
Thank you.
Communications with our publics.
Okay.
I said data and research-based decision-making.
We'll be looking at some of that today.
I'll go in place of Eric.
Since he's trying to solve our
yeah.
tech issues.
Innovative. Innovation. Innovative.
Great.
I'll just shout. I wrote belonging.
And if someone has said one that you wrote down, say it anyway.
Yeah, I had the value of public education especially, and its ability, I guess for public education specifically, and education in general, to change lives and change trajectories through life.
Great.
Inclusion of all abilities. Inclusion of all abilities.
Great, thank you.
I had equity in education.
Thank you. You're tapped out. Okay.
Desire for systemic collaboration.
Okay.
Community engagement.
We're hearing feedback from someone? Oh, it is the TV. Okay. That's okay. Thanks for trying. Okay.
Healthy skepticism.
That's from someone who's been on the board for a while. I recognize that feeling.
All my other ones are repeats.
Can you tell me what those are, the reasons?
Oh, yeah. I also had curiosity, and I also had integrity.
Just had curiosity and integrity. Okay, great.
I don't really know how to say this. I put educator lens, but I think the value I bring to this work is valuing educator perspectives.
Great.
Respect.
Thank you.
Communications in a crisis or issue management.
Okay. Great.
Do we keep- She had all
Lance, you're
hers.
done? You're done. You're tapped out.
Do you keep going? if you
Yeah,
have them?
please, go ahead.
Honesty.
Honesty. Do you want to read us the rest of yours?
Perfect. I had equity and inclusion.
Equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Okay, which we also had.
Yeah, that was the repeat.
Yep, we had another one. Okay, good. Thank you.
I had leadership as well, leadership service, and then equity / all means all, and honesty, telling the truth even when it's hard.
There. Okay, we had honesty. Okay, good.
I would say information that keeps flowing to all people through all means, two-way.
Two-way.
And also, then all means all.
I'm sorry, the last thing you said?
All means all.
All means all. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, did we get everyone's? We've cleared the deck for you all. So I'm going to just read through these really quickly, and I want you just to think about what you hear. Optimism, curiosity is a repeat. Love, inquisitiveness, value of education. There are a number of those around value of education, belief in public education. Discipline, advocacy for all students. Integrity was mentioned multiple times. Communication in various ways was mentioned multiple times with the public, to all, two-way communication in a crisis, crisis management, data and research based decision-making, innovation, belonging, again, belief in public education, inclusion, equity, all means all, that whole topic, desire for system collaboration, healthy skepticism, having that educator lens, bringing your different perspectives to the work that you do. Respect and honesty were both repeated a couple of times, and then just leadership and service. So those are some shared values among all of you on this team. Just curious if you have any reflections on those. Did any of them surprise you, or do those feel like they embody the work that you do? No, go ahead, please.
Nothing surprised me, and I think I agree with what everyone said. Like those would be all things I think are positive to this.
Any other reflections on that from anyone? The nice thing is that it's a list, it's a long list, and some of them were unique, and a lot of them were repeated. And again, that speaks to the power of a team coming together with some shared values, but also with some individual ones too. So we'll kind of keep those in mind as we go through the day today, and we're going to dive in and give you a little bit of information about where we're headed today. So several of you have done the board self-assessment before. So I think Eric and Leah and Mark have done the board self-assessment. I don't think you have. Have you, Lisa, before?
We have not, but we did watch last year's meeting, so we have some idea.
You did watch?
We watched last year's meeting.
Oh, okay, great. So the board self-assessment is based on the Washington School Board standards. I'm going to hand these out to you. The board standards were updated last year, and so some of them may be a little bit new. Sorry, let me see right now. You have yours. Okay. Lindsay gets extra points for having hers with her today. You have this one, right? The new one? That is the front page. Nope, that's good. That's great. Perfect. So we'll talk a little bit about where the board standards came from. Are these just somebody's good idea, or are they, like you all said, research-based and based on practices that have proven to be effective for leadership for students? So you all have done this board, not necessarily two of you who are new to the board, but this board has done your board self-assessment for many years, which is great because it allows you to look at your progress over time and areas of growth. But we also have some new tools this year that we're going to share with you called more of a focused board self-assessment. And I've brought those tools with us today, and we'll be spending some time working on that. So in terms of why to use the board self-assessment, we're going to set a little bit of a foundation here just to let you know what is it based on and why were they even created back in 2008 and 2009 is really when the board standards were first established. At that time, and even still today, there was a lot of research based on what you would consider to be the proximal factors to students. So parents, teachers, even principals, there was a lot of research on what is the impact of parents, of families, of teachers on students and their achievement. And there was not very much around what you would consider to be distal or more distant factors like the superintendent, the community, and the school board. So we at that point, back in 2008, when this committee was first convened to look at this, wondered, what is out there that tells school boards what makes a difference? Because we can guess, or we can base it on research that's out there. And as you know, school districts also are better off if they aren't guessing what works, but really looking at what has been proven. So back in the late 1990s through 2010, the Iowa School Board Association conducted the Lighthouse Studies. And that was really the first large-scale study of the impact of school boards on student outcomes. And what they determined from that, it's lots and lots and lots of research. It fills fills volumes. But really the upshot is this, and that's that boards of high-performing districts behave differently than boards of low-performing districts. Now, high-performing districts, low-performing districts, what does that mean? So there are only certain things that we can measure. And certainly back, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, really there weren't even very good measurements then. No Child Left Behind and the state assessments, whatever you may think of those certainly have some downsides. But one of the upsides is that we did actually have some standard ways to assess student learning. And so when we talk today about student achievement, I will just tell you we are only looking at academic achievement as measured by state assessments. You all are looking at things in different ways. You look at things like third grade reading readiness. You look at ninth grade passing rates. You look at discipline rates in your district. So there are lots of different ways to do that. The state hasn't really quite caught up with us on that yet. So I just want to state that we are using the measures that are out there and that are common among all school districts in the state of Washington. And so you may have even heard them. I don't know if any of you came to our breakout session at annual conference, but we've been working with two researchers out of Montana, Dr. Ivan Lawrenson and Dr. Bill McCaw, and we've worked with them since 2010 when Dr. Lawrenson, who was not Dr. Lawrenson yet, wanted to do his doctoral thesis on the work of the board self-assessment and student outcomes. So we have worked with him, and he started the now, I guess it would be a 14-year process of looking at Washington State's data, because the board self-assessment survey that comes out of the school board standards is the only one nationally that has been, what is the word that I'm looking for? It has been proven through statistics to be statistically reliable and valid. And that has been tested over time since it's been in place for a long time. And so what these two have determined from their research is that board actions really do matter, because school boards have certain factors that are within their control, and that when they are able to address those and create conditions where inequities are overcome, every student can learn at higher levels of learning. So, and a lot of that speaks to what you all said is your values today. There's been other research as well, and I'm going to go through this quickly just because I want to get to your own data. But I also, again, want to just let you know, this isn't just somebody's good idea. The research is really important to us. We're consistently looking at research, and we'll show you some new research today, too, and that's where we'll get into a little bit more focused work. These two researchers, Lee and Edens, bless them, they went to hundreds of school board meetings, and they observed them. They observed them for behaviors that they saw related to the board. And then they calibrated those with what the student achievement scores were for that school district. And this is what they found over time, that low-performing districts, in terms of student achievement, their board meetings were less orderly. They didn't spend as much time on talking about student achievement. They talked about other things on the agenda. School board members were not listening respectfully or attentively to whoever was speaking, and spent a lot more time advancing their own agenda. There weren't good working relationships with the governance team. Fewer members relied on the superintendent for advice or input. There was excessive talking within the meetings, and less focus on policy issues. So those are some commonalities. I mean, so logically you could think, yeah, that's a messy board meeting, right? That's a messy board meeting. School board members are not working as a collaborative team. But this was research that connected it to how students in the district were doing. And our researchers, Dr. Lawrenson and Dr. McCaw, have seen from their research that student achievement is both a leading and lagging indicator of, I said it the right way first. Student achievement is a leading or lagging indicator of what was going on at the board level. So when you have chaos, did you do it? Maybe. Hello. Thank you, Leah. Great job. So when you... Perfect. Okay. I'm sorry I've been annoying for the last 20 minutes. We'll hope that improves, but no promises. So something for you all to keep in mind is when you see a board that is exhibiting these kinds of things in a board meeting over time, that is eventually going to trickle down into student behavior, into student achievement. So if there's chaos at the top, it takes a while, but eventually it gets down to the student level, and it just brings chaos into the whole system. Superintendents and upper level leadership within the district, they feel uncertain. They don't know how they should be leading, and that seeps down all the way through the organization and eventually reaches students. The opposite is true too. So if you have a board that goes from a lot of chaos, not collaborative relationships, and they get their act together, it takes a long time for that to trickle back down through the system too. So just because a district is doing well today doesn't mean that it will a year or 10 years from now. So it's one of those things to consider, that the solid leadership principles are important, and they're important over time for student achievement. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Does their research only look at board meetings? Do they take into account how board functions outside of board meetings as well? Or is it really just measured by that?
This study by Lee and Edens 10 years ago was just board meetings because they were public and they were observable. Yeah, yep. But certainly you're going to look at these and think, okay, if we have people who are not having good relationships, not relying on the superintendent for some input, those are going to leak into all kinds of other relationship issues too. Yeah, it's a good question. Another piece of data that comes from the Center for Public Education is looking at, so now we're switching from behavior that does not support student achievement to board behavior and characteristics that do support it. So I'll let you just read through those for a moment. These echo a lot of the values you all talked about a few minutes ago, where you're talking about the belief that all students can achieve, collaborating with staff and community, continuous improvement based on research, trust and honor your roles and responsibilities. So these are important characteristics when you're looking at your work together, even as you move through challenging times. Your team won't always agree on everything. No team does. And the way that you lead through that as a group, through challenges, speaks to how you're leading your district and how you're leading for students. So again, any questions on that before I dive a little bit further into some of what the board standards looks like? So you can see from the board standards, there are 5 core principles. We spent 2021 and 2022 on a comprehensive update of the board standards, and because there's more research out there since 2009 and 2010, a lot more research. So school boards have been traditionally a very understudied influence in public education, and that has started to change. So as we conducted that research, we looked at national, international, state research that was available, and we were surprised, I was surprised, in fact, that these 5 core principles of effective boards remained the same. We were fully prepared to have these change, but they did not. So as the 5 core principles, they didn't change. Now, within each of these, we delve down, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. One thing, so the board self-assessment is really just how is your district putting these standards into practice. So those are the questions. If they look familiar on here, that's because they make up the board self-assessment. We also spent quite a bit of time looking at individual school director standards because certainly over the last decade or so, we really have seen some spectacular behavior sometimes from individual school directors. And individuals impact the team. You all know that. That's always true no matter what team you're on. So we took a little bit more time and looked specifically at the research for individual school directors. The first 5, these have been, they've been tweaked a little bit, but essentially the first 5 remained the same. There are more details. The individual standards can be found starting on page 30. If you want to take a look at that in your standards document. The 6th one, commitment to educational equity, was new. That really wasn't found. There was some language around, supporting all students, but really not much of a specific emphasis on educational equity. So this was added as a personal commitment that school directors need to come to the table with, and I heard that from all of you this morning as well. And you'll probably like this cartoon. I'll let you read it. Intuition, crazy voice, I don't know, hard to tell. I initially got drawn into this work long before I worked for WASDA. I went to the National School Board Association conference, and I saw Dr. Lawrenson and Dr. McCaw speaking. And they go through a process where they say, okay, out of these board standards, which one do you think most impacts student achievement? Now, I'd been working as a consultant for WASDA, and I'd been a board member for more than 10 years. So I was pretty sure my intuition was right. They went through a series of 3 of those questions, kind of quizzes. I got every one of them wrong, and I was really irritated. So I went up and introduced myself to them. This was probably actually about 15 years ago. Went up and introduced myself to them, and because I was from Washington and they were working with Washington School Board standards, we connected. And I confessed to them that I was highly annoyed that I had completely failed their quiz. And they laughed and said, that's kind of the whole point, is that what we think works maybe isn't always the thing that has. It's not that they don't have any impact. It's that some of them have a much stronger impact than others, and that's one of the things that we're going to delve into a little bit today. This is your leadership cycle. I think this probably looks familiar to you. You know, you really, as a board, you start with a strategic plan to set your vision, ensure that you and your district are understanding what student needs are out there. You know, that's part of looking at data. Again, not relying on your intuition about what students need, but really looking at what does the data tell us as a team. Putting together that actionable plan, and then monitoring the work. Monitoring the work is a big part of the job that you all have. Looking at the data again and looking at, is this plan that we've put into place working for us? And then the reflection and review. And then you go back to the strategic plan again. So, and tweak it as needed, update it, you know, from time to time. So you're familiar with that. And then, of course, the student context around this is why we do the work, right? All of you said that this morning, that really you're here for students and for the community. So Dr. Lawrenson and Dr. McCaw have told us that Washington State has the largest collection of school board data in the world. And I've said to them several times, in the world? Really, in the world? And they say, yes, there isn't anyone else who has this collection of, this is what school boards are doing, and this is how it's connected to their student outcomes. There isn't anyone else who's connected that work, and we've done it since 2009. So it's a good 15 years worth of research that we've looked at, and so that's what we bring to this work. So we're going to start and dive into your own board self-assessment, and I'm going to pause because I've been talking at you for a few minutes, and that's about the longest I'll talk at you. See if you have any questions or if anything's coming up for you. Or maybe you've just not had enough coffee this morning. I'm going to pass it this way. So I have a lot of paperwork coming your direction. Here, just pass that down. And then I'm going to, so that is probably that is the big, thick document that you all are used to seeing. And then this is one you, I think, probably have not seen yet, which is called the score ranking. Pass that around too. And I'm going to walk you through these, so don't worry about how much there is here in front of you. So the two reports, this one, the really thick one, first of all, I want you to look at the cover and look at the fact that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you have 7 years worth of data, which is outstanding. That really looks at your data over time. And really, now, you normally would have done this in December, which would have put you in 2023. So you didn't miss a year, I promise. You're just doing it a month later than you normally do it. But you can really see, 2016, 2017, 2018, we know what happened in 2020, 2021, 22, and then really this would have been 2023 for you. So you have a lot of longitudinal data to look at for yourselves. So go ahead and just open this up. And I know a couple of you have done this before and a couple of you haven't, so I want to walk you through it. My apologies that it's going to be a little bit of a review for others. So if you look at what would be page 3, if it had a page number on it, it's the one that says at the top, Framework for Governance Aggregate Data. So if you look along on the left-hand side, you can see that there are the 5 standard areas. And these are the aggregate scores that you gave yourselves within all of the questions within those standards. So for standard 1, for example, let's see, we've got 22 questions. So that scoring is the aggregate of all 22 questions within that standard area. The nice thing about this is that you can look at it and see, okay, where are the areas where we see more green and blue and less yellow and red? Green and blue mean, yes, we always do this, or yes, most of the time we do this. Yellow is some of the time we do this, and red is never. And then there's also don't know. And especially for a board that has a couple new board members, the don't know is perfectly fine, and it is not counted in your score. So if 2 people said, I don't know, and 3 people had another answer, we only score the 3 people who answered it, because I don't think you should have points taken away from you from having brand new board members. It's just part of what every board does. So you can kind of take a look at these and see how you have changed over time. Take a look at this and tell me what you see in terms of which of your, looking kind of at the green and blue, which of these does it appear is your strongest area among the 5 standards for this year? Everyone agree? Standard 3? Mm-hmm. So creating conditions district-wide for student and staff success. That's where you rated yourselves most highly. And where did you rate yourselves lowest? Standard 5, engaging the local community and representing the values and expectations they hold for their schools. Now, I want to point out, these are very high, these are really high scores, and boards, as they work together over time, tend to be harder on themselves. That's one of the things that we notice. When you know more, you're more critical of your own of your own actions. And that's actually a good thing, because over time you'll think about where are the areas I want to improve now. So as you go ahead and turn over to page 4. And again, you can see here how you've performed over time, how you've rated yourselves over time on every individual question, okay? So let's set that aside for a moment. And now I want you to take a look at the smaller of the 2 documents, the one that says a survey score ranking. This is a little bit of a cheat sheet that will help you digest all, 42 pages of this report, however long it is. And it is organized from where you scored yourself the highest all the way to down where you scored yourself the lowest, okay? And this is helpful because we're going to go into a couple of rounds of conversation where you are talking about what you see here from your report. A couple things that I want to mention to you. Just like a student's grades, this doesn't tell everything about yourself. And in fact, we do not look at the aggregate scores of districts ever. Because, number one, they change over time. Your composition changes. And as I mentioned, when you know more and as you mature as a board over time, you tend to be more self-critical. So this is your score only, and these are your scores only. It's what you said about yourself in terms of, we feel like we're doing a good job here. We feel like we could improve here. And that's nothing to beat yourselves up over. That's what we do as individuals too, right? New Year's resolutions? Did a really good job of exercising last year. Boy, I should stop eating chocolate this year, right? So it's, I just want to be clear about how to use this. This is never for beating yourselves or other people up over. It's for looking at where you judged your own performance and setting some goals around it. No, please don't be sorry. I want you to ask questions.
I'm curious because I kind of had, and maybe this is my intuition, my thought of when there are new board members, I think I would expect maybe those scores to go down. And I would almost think over time, if you're on the board, do you kind of get into this routine? And if you're here more, does that, if you've been on the board longer, do you notice that the scores are actually increasing? And do they start to go down when you have new members versus, because it sounds like you're saying if you've been on the board longer, you're more critical, and so you might be a harder grader on this. Is that normally what you see?
You know, it's an interesting question because we don't look at these in terms of what turnover on the board looks like. It might be a really interesting research project for our researchers. But the fact of the matter is all boards have turnover. Some have a lot more turnover than others. But they all have some turnover, and that's why it used to be that don't know actually counted against districts in scores. And so a couple of years ago, as I was looking at this with the researchers, I said, that doesn't make any sense. You need to acknowledge that new school board members come along, and they're not going to know how the board did in some of these areas. But I will say that boards, I would consider your board kind of a mature board in terms of the fact that you've taken and reviewed this data for many years in a row now. And what we generally see is boards that do that tend to be critical of themselves. And that's a good thing, because it lets your board think about how can we continue to improve, constant improvement all the time. Yeah, Mark.
I know when I was filling this out, and when I filled it out in the past, I have a problem with giving us 4s because I feel no one's perfect. There's always room for improvement. And by giving ourselves a 4 at times, we don't think back, okay, how could we have done it better? And so maybe it's the skeptical nature of my being, but I don't see perfection as being to be expected as much as to be sought out.
I think that's a really valid point. Yeah, there aren't a lot of things that we always do. And so everyone's going to have their own scoring mechanism, and that's why, balancing it out over 5 different responses is really helpful. So, yeah, your scoring mechanism might be different than Lisa's, and that's okay. And over time, it might be as the composition of your board shifts. But as you look at that aggregate page, there's a lot of consistency in that aggregate page. But it also can tell you what's going on in the district right now, too, or what's going on with your board. Any other questions about that? On the score ranking survey, let me walk you across the top really quickly, because I'm going to have you look at some specifics on this page. So if you look at the very top of the page, you'll see over on the far left the abbreviation for average. Now, if you look at the first one, that's an average of 4. So basically what that means is that all of you gave it a 4. Okay, so clearly not much variation. Then there's the minimum and the maximum. Go all the way down to the bottom of the page where it says that you have an average of 3.83. So the lowest score that anybody gave it was a 3, and the highest was a 4. Okay? And then back up to the top again, so you've got the average, the minimum score, the maximum score, and then you have the standard deviation. Obviously, when you all gave yourselves a 4, there's zero standard deviation. There's a bit of a standard deviation down at the bottom, 0.4. When we're looking at what standard deviation is significant in this work, you would be looking at a 1 or above. That shows you that you have some real differences among scores. Then next to it is just the question number. Okay, so it's question number 37, and then next to that is here's what the question was. And then going further across, the next column is the standard. It's in standard number 3, that first one is, and that's creating conditions for success. Okay, and then we'll talk about the high leverage indicator on the next round that we go through. Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Question. I noticed as we're going through here that we had more agreement as we got to the end of the assessment. Could that be assessment fatigue and saying, just I'm going to get this over with and mark it out, it's just a thought. As I look at it, it's 37, 31, 33, and then we get to the lower numbers where average goes down, and it's the lower numbers where we've just begun.
It could be, but some of them are also grouped in standard areas. So yeah, I don't know. You tell me. Did you whip through the end of it faster than? Okay, we have a confession. That's something that you'll have some time to talk about as you go through and look at some of your responses to this. So, great question. So we were going to pair you up, but your superintendent's not here today because of a personal issue, and so I think what we'll do is we'll put you in. We'll do teams of 3 and a team of 2 in pairs. So the next thing I'm going to hand out to you is your worksheet. Let's see if I can find that. It's a lot of papers here. And then we're going to let you get started and have some conversations with each other. Send 2 down that direction. 3 over here. There you go. This worksheet is just for you. It's not for anyone else. It's for you to record your thoughts and comments as you go through this. So we're going to do 3 rounds. And I am going to make you start with your strengths. Everybody wants to go to where did I score myself the lowest? Don't do that. Here's why. Your strengths are a place to build on. You want to build on the strengths that you have. Recognize where they are. You may not even, consciously recognize as a team where your strengths are. This helps you dial into where those strengths are. And for each of these, we're going to do 3 rounds to start with. One is areas of strength. One is opportunities for growth that you've identified, areas where you rated yourselves lowest. And then the third round is going to be areas where there's a large standard deviation. So there was a lot of variation in the answers that you gave. They might have gone from 4 to 1 or, 2 to 4 or something like that. And that's where you can look at areas for potentially increased cohesiveness as a team. So I'm going to give you some time to talk as pairs or these small groups. And as you talk, at least one of you should write some things down because you're going to be asked to share them out with the group as a whole. Okay? So the questions that are on the screen are also on your worksheet. So areas of strength is where we start. Those are in green. So for each of these areas, I want you to take a look at, did you see any patterns in the areas where your board was strong? Were they clustered in 1 or 2 standard areas, and are there some common themes among those questions? Okay, and so as you look at your score ranking survey, you can see over on the left-hand side where it says average, those areas that are strengths for you are in green. So if you look from page 1 back to page 2, they go almost all the way down to the bottom of 2. So it's essentially everything where you gave yourself an aggregate score of 3.67 and higher. You can also, if you want to delve into some detail, go into the big report, like why did we say that, or how many of us said that? You can dive into that. But this is your way of really looking at where are the areas where we gave ourselves the highest score. Okay? Does that make some sense? So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes in your small groups to talk together. Let's just work with the room right now and have you 3 work together and have you 2 work together. I'll give you about a 2-minute warning when we're at 8 minutes. And I will guarantee you'll be annoyed at me for stopping your conversations. It's okay. It's a hazard of my job. But you will then be able to have some time to talk as a whole. You'll want to write those things down that you want to share out with each other, and then we'll talk about some commonalities. Does that make sense? Okay, you can do whatever you need. Yes, if you need coffee or another muffin, go ahead and do it, and yeah. So I warned you you'd be annoyed at me when I told you it was time to stop talking. Now's the time. But you'll talk more. You're just going to do it as a group now.
I'm designating Lisa to be our speaker.
You've been voluntold.
Yes.
Absolutely. No worries. Wow. And it's not even an hour off.
No,
it's like 50 minutes off.
It's an obnoxious amount of time off.
Yeah.
They seem to be speeding up though, so maybe it'll just catch up one day.
The brain. Oh, that's interesting.
It's been weeks. It's been weeks.
That is very. So it wasn't the time change or the year, just random.
It's like gremlins inside a monkey.
Yeah.
They can't find it.
time to get an old-fashioned dial clock and just set it at the end of the table, right? Okay, are you ready to come together and chat a little bit now? You good? Okay, so who wants to start? So what I'd like you to do is each of the groups share out kind of what you talked about, and then let's spend a little bit of time. This is just your time to talk about what you saw. Lisa, do you mind starting? And your team, are not the only one who has to talk. Your team can weigh in as well.
Yeah, so we saw Standard 3 as being pretty much all of the top questions were certainly clustered in Standard 3, which is creating conditions district-wide for student and staff success. And we talked to our policies and the fact that we have policies that cover most of these areas. The questions themselves were really sort of at that level, like, do you have a policy that does X? And so it's pretty easy to agree, like, you can objectively go to board docs and you can see that we do have a policy, around regular evaluation and management of safety and security risks. We did talk, and it's also, I said that I appreciate as a new board member that it's a relatively manageable set of policies. It's not, we have our board policies that are separate from admin policies. I've probably read like low single digits number of the admin policies, but all of our board policies, because they're at a high enough level to really cover the work of the school district pretty well. We talked about the fact, though, that like not wanting to sort of entirely rest on that success, or it's great that we have policies, but also wanting to understand at a little bit deeper level what is actually happening on the ground. So yes, we have a policy around safety and security risks, but how well is it being implemented? Even just like how is it implemented at times? Budget is a good example, which I am definitely still trying to wrap my brain around and understand, just to make sure that continues, that we continue to grow as board members and are able to effectively lead the district. So it's great that we've sort of said this is what's important to us at a high level, but making sure that we're also, have enough knowledge to really understand if we don't just have those policies, but we're helping the district do a good job of that. That covered.
Great. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything either of you want to add to that or build on? Okay. Great. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. You two. What did your team talk about?
I'll talk first. Okay. Sound good? Not going to repeat everything Lisa said. And if I guess, so we talked about that so the question asked whether there were one or two standards it was clustered in, and we identified it was just clustered in one standard, and that standard being the third one. And broadly defined, we thought of it as, these are like policy, like we have, the board believes it has policies and governance system in place, I guess. And why is this a strength? I think Lindsay correctly identified it's a strength, or we perceive it to be a strength because it's been an area of focus for this board for a while. And well, to continue to, the second part of that question is actually kind of interesting, and like to continue to improve that area. Does that mean we continue to allocate time and keep it a focus? Do we shift that time to other things, knowing that it is a strength? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I've been puzzling on.
For the sake particularly of your two new board members, why would you say it has been a focus for your board? Was it an area that your team felt like needed improvement over the years, or is it just?
Why has it been a focus?
You said you feel that this is strong because it's been a focus for your board for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you know,
And
if
do I know
if you can
why
say
it's
why
been a
it's been a
focus?
focus. And if you don't, that's okay. This isn't a gotcha. I was just curious.
I think I would be guessing. I mean, I could give you an answer, but I think I'd be somewhere between speculating and guessing. So I don't know if that's helpful. Is it? Do you want me to?
It's your perspective.
Right. But I mean, I could start answering, but it might be the different answer tomorrow, is what I'm saying. I don't,
Yeah, that's
I don't
okay.
know. So like,
Yeah,
okay.
you don't
I
need to.
mean-
Just a curiosity.
I mean, okay, one reason, I think the composition of the board is such that that's been an interest for the individual board members that have been on the board for a while. So there's that. I do think that that's a value of our community, in particular in having a non-micromanaging governance structure. I perceive that to be the case. Shoot, I don't know that I'm totally answering your prompt.
No, that's all helpful.
And
That's
you
good.
know, okay, and then like, I'm trying to keep this as a strength and not,
Sure.
but the why maybe is, you know, like culturally as a board, I think we've been very inward focused on at time for most of the time that I've been on the board in terms of thinking about processes within, and I think that fits within that. That's maybe a strength, maybe a weakness, depending at times. But if I reflect back, I think really, I mean, it has been a focus, I think, because of the composition of the individual board, you know, the strength, talents, interests of individual board members that have been on the board.
Thank you.
As an outsider, I would say,
I might give a different answer tomorrow.
I'll call you tomorrow.
I would say I think this board has really shifted to the governance policy model, and I think with that came kind of a revamping of a lot of the policies. And so I think those have kind of been over years, like that's where the focus has been when I step back and look at it, and this whole standard to me looks like all of the policies. And that's kind of what this board to me has been trying to build up from working around that governance policy model.
Anyone else?
I'm
Other thoughts
reflecting
there?
my own answer. Yours made sense.
Yeah, Mark.
Having been around for a while, I found that where the dividing line is between policy, governance, and administrative policy varies on where the staff wants you to be. You know, oh, we don't want to deal with that, so now it's board policy. Oh, I'm sorry, you stepped over. That's really, that policy is getting a little bit too specific, pushing us back. And so I think you get into a comfort zone. And it's, is it healthy? It's quicker. It's more efficient. Is it more effective? Don't know. I think we found, you find a comfort zone in staying in the 10,000 foot level because you know that someone else is held accountable for on the ground. And the fact that I want to see the fact that our policies actually make a difference to our students, to our parents, to our staff. Anyway, that's just for what it's worth, my 2 cents.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mark.
Oh my God, I'm about to break
good.
my table.
You're okay.
I was just going to add on to what Eric was saying and what Lindsay was saying, and I agree. I think it's at one point the board, whatever the composition was, agreed that we were going to be governing using a coherent governance model, and that model then dictates that we operate within policy and not within the operations of the district. That we have said one of our biggest goals is to hire a superintendent who we will designate the authority of making operational decisions to. And if we as a body have agreed that that is the governance model that we will follow, then it is our job to then implement that decision. And I would argue that that's been the goal, and that's why there has been a focus on policy. Different question if a board thinks that that's not the governance model that we would want to follow, but for a very long time, there has been consensus that that is what we are going to be modeling our governance under. So.
The disconnect that I see is the public's expectation and the public's perception of if we say, well, we're only in policy, and we are, but they see that as us restricting ourselves and basically avoiding responsibility, some of them. Again, it's a matter of perception by the public, and it's never going to be a total understanding, but it's a matter of, well, is that a dodge for responsibility of it, the policy not being enacted well? Is that board even necessary? Some of them have questioned. That's the problem I think we have when we were, and it's a good problem to have in a way. We say, well, we enact the policies and the district carries it out. But you still have, I think, members of the public who expect a more tangible policy, if you will. I'm not articulating that well. But.
No, you are articulating it well. The reality is that very few communities actually understand what boards do, and more specifically, what they don't do. You all know that because you get some crazy questions like, could you make sure that my student's teacher does X? No, I can't. That's not not even remotely my job as a board member. But they see it from that they're very close to it. I mean, you all either currently or have had kids in the district, and you understand that those personal touches are the things that matter to you a lot. But that's what you hire your staff for. It's what you hire your superintendent for, and what your superintendent oversees. So it is difficult. It's really tough because helping people understand what you don't do, because policy is nebulous to a lot of people. So yeah, it can be really challenging. But I want you to focus on the words of this one, of standard number 3. You are creating the conditions for district and student success. And those may not, it doesn't say you are making student success, or you are personally responsible for student success. You are creating those conditions for that to happen. So it can feel a little less satisfying, but it is deeply important.
Yeah, I thought of it as this is sort of, it's almost more internal. I sort of started to say something, and then I stopped myself in group, which was getting into how we communicate that to our community, but I think that gets to standard 5. And so I tried to, when we're focused on strengths, I tried to stay focused on, I think from a policy perspective, and this is from an outsider coming in too. I didn't even begin to understand policy until recently, even having been in this district for 10 plus years. Yeah, so that's definitely a challenge. It's hard to understand that, and I still struggle even being in it. So I'm sort of like, what altitude am I supposed to be at here? Where am I being helpful?
Right.
But yeah, if we're staying focused on strength, I will say I've come to appreciate. At first, I was very frustrated by. Why is the school board not reopening schools after COVID? Like, why aren't they just coming down and doing that? And as I've come to understand better how the board actually works, Eric's rolling. He's like,
Turn the mic off.
There's no sound when you roll your eyes, so you're safe.
I forgive you, but like, not only do I forgive that instance, but I've come to understand why that's really, really important to stay at that level. And so again, staying focused on strengths, I really appreciate where we're at, and want to continue building on that as an area of strength.
You asked a really good question, which is, and I've not heard it phrased this way before. I like it. What altitude should I be at? I recommend that you feel free to have conversations with each other and even with your superintendent. I'll just share with you, as when I had kids in the school district where I was a board member, there was one issue in particular where I was deeply, deeply frustrated for the services that my own daughter was not receiving, and that I recognized that less vocal parents than I were really, really not getting for their students. And so we just had this discussion, like, look, I know that this level of frustration is for me as a parent, and I know that's well below, that's down in the weeds, down in the operational weeds. But I also have my hat on as a board member, and I'm thinking, if I can't get these services for my child, who can in our district? So, and so, you know, the last, I know Lindsay's like raring to go. Let me finish real quickly, and then I want to give you space. The question is, how do I bring my whole self to this job and not overstep your boundaries, superintendent? And we had some really healthy and hard conversations about that. And you shouldn't shy away from it, but don't make assumptions. Have the conversation. I feel deeply about this issue. How can we work together in my role as a board member and your role as a superintendent to change this, or to begin looking at it and coming up with some solutions?
I'm going to thank you for saying that. I think that is something I am really struggling with right now, is having always had that parent advocacy hat on, and then here, if I'm a parent advocating, but in this position, I am noticing that I'm stepping back more, and for the sake of my kids, that's not fair. And I think you're right, it brings some element of a more vocal voice and a different understanding of how this operates, but then am I wasting superintendent's time by bringing this up? I appreciate that, because that struggle is real.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to shift. Does that sound good? Yeah, again, I am a strong proponent, both in your board life as well as the rest of your life, of just stating the situation and saying, can we talk about this? This is a hard situation. I'm struggling with this. How can we work together? You can do that within the board too. Just that honesty, that level of honesty, and you know, there's a lot of vulnerability in that too, but saying, I want to be part of the solution, and I'm frustrated right now. And that's okay. A lot of good can come out of those conversations. Yeah, absolutely.
I just brought this up at the beginning, where I know that I had a lot of I don't know questions or responses, and I went through, and of those 9 that we scored, everyone scored 4 on, 3 of them had I don't knows. So like question number 36, have policies for evaluating staff based on student success. Half of the responses were I don't know. So only 3 people were being assessed on that, I guess. So that was just something to bring up, that it'd be interesting to have on here, like, how many are I don't knows?
Yes, and I asked you to bring that back up as a group, so thank you for that. So for you 3 not new board members, a really good way to know what you need to cover with your new board members is to look through this and see where you find the black. So trying to find one where you have, was there one where you noticed there were a few of them? 36 has 3. Okay, so as I look at 36 on, so question 36 is, do we have policies for evaluating staff based on student success? That is a great question to have, and pretty common for a new school board member to wonder, do we? So as you're planning your work together as a board, I would go through here and look at those areas. There were also 2 I don't knows under question 37, which was policies that support research-based best practices for staff development. Those would be areas where I would recommend that you and your superintendent plan for some time to look at those. What are those policies, and what does it look like in the district?
I think it's interesting. Eric and I talked about have policies for evaluating staff, and I think in my mind, staff goes immediately to like educators, and I was like, I don't know. But Eric said, I view that as the superintendent. And it's like, yeah, I guess defining what staff means would have probably changed my I don't know if I knew.
Yeah, that's a good conversation as well. What does it look like? Okay, No need to be sorry. So we're going to look at the opportunities for growth. I know you all wanted to go to the last page, so we're going to give you the opportunity to do that. We are looking at your scores now that are 2.67 and lower. Those happen to start on page 5 and continue on to page 6 on your ranking survey. So why don't you mix your teams up a little bit? I'm going to just let you do that on your own. Lindsay, is it easier for you if Eric moves over there? Okay, and then there's plenty of room for 1 or 2 people here. Same questions here, exactly the same. Do you see some patterns? Were they clustered in 1 or 2 standard areas? What are some common themes? How can you use these as opportunities to grow and improve as a board? All righty? And I'll give you 10 minutes. So 1 or 2 of you can, of you 3, 1 or 2 of you, can you move over here and work with Lindsay? Gives you a chance to stand up too. You can stand up even if you're not moving. Okay, let's pull the teams back together. Nope, you're fine. No apologizing for good conversations. No apologizing for good conversations. She was talking, so she couldn't. Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's great to have an opportunity to have these conversations, isn't it? Just you don't get a chance to do this very often in a board meeting. Okay, so talk about opportunities for growth. What did you come up with here? Which team wants to go first?
I know.
It's
We didn't.
It's volunteer the new school board members.
Hold on. We mostly in the standard 5, right? Engagement with community, engagement of the community, and I just kind of want to talk about what we just talked about at the end. I think that defining what that means, because I think we have different definitions. Do you mind if I share that? Like, I think Leia's definition is, are we ensuring that the district is engaging with the community? And I think I looked at that as, yeah, that's that standard 3, right? Where all the policies are there, are they engaging with the community? And I view standard 5 as the board's engagement with the community. So I kind of see it as a different path. And so I think that leads to, again, it goes back to your interpretation. And I think with like all of our OEs, I appreciate the superintendent's interpretation because then it puts us all on the same page. We don't have that for all our policies. We don't have interpretation and similar, like, what does staff mean? That might look different. So until we're all on the same page, I don't know if, hold on, I know, sorry. I think getting on the same page of that understanding of what do these standards mean, that might be a reason why there's differences in like from a 4 to a 1 or, yeah. Sorry, that was, what else do you want to, I didn't really answer the questions, but.
Whatever conversation you had is what we can bring to the whole group.
Oh, and I think the other thing, like, and I brought this up with Eric when we talked about the strengths, and it was hard not to look at the areas of growth because, like Lisa had said, if you're so focused internally on, we've been so focused on our policies that is that internal piece where the board hasn't done much of the outward piece of, to me, which is the engagement of community. Part of being an elected leader is engaging with your constituents, is hearing their concerns, bringing those back. And I think that's a piece where, with the focus so much on the internal work, kind of potentially neglected that. I think the district is really moving forward positively with this, and I think it's a really good opportunity for us to kind of jump on as a board and kind of follow along with them as well on what we do. Okay.
Well, you two identified a really important distinction, which is what is the responsibility of the board and what's the responsibility of the district, and how do those two overlap or not? And so, I'm just looking at the last page. Question 7 says, do you communicate district performance to the public in clear and understandable ways? Well, you can't do that unless someone's communicated that to you, right? So as a board, you rely on staff to communicate district performance to you so that you can then engage with the public. And part of it also is finding out how in our district are things being communicated to parents, to stakeholders, what are the ways, and then supporting them. So it's not an either or question, it is both, and that's the challenge. And again, that's one of those areas where you can have that conversation, like what is the role of the district in communicating to and having that be a two-way communication, versus the board. How can you make sure that those efforts are complementary? Yeah. Anything else you want to add, Leah, about your conversation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I read these questions, my interpretation and I guess where I'm coming from is families and community members are really interested in the operational and the implementation. So what the district is doing for their kids, right? Whether or not they're going to get the education and the things that they need. And I feel, I strongly believe that fostering effective communication within the district as a whole, and by that I mean administrative staff and the people who are running the district and making those operational decisions and the people that it is impacting is of the greatest value, and ensuring that that freeway, right, is flowing is really the goal of effective communication. It's not, for me, it's not about what is this 5-member group doing, because what we are doing is trying to ensure that that is happening. And so I think I struggle a little bit with, well, what is quote unquote enough communication from the board versus the district with the community, because I see it as a whole. So perfect example would be, for the district committees that we have going on this year, there's like the budget advisory committee, there's a facilities committee, there's strategic planning committees. Those are all district committees, but then the board has said and set the expectation of when you're doing these things, you need to reach out to community and get feedback before you make any decisions. And so for me, that is effective board engagement with community. But I think it can also be viewed as, well, that's district communication with the community, not board. And so that definition is kind of blurred.
Yeah, I think for me, this has been just an area of a lot of confusion, and it's that whole stay in your lane and trying to see what those lanes are. And I think I try to compartmentalize. So like there are district committees, and those are ones where we have said we want the district to communicate, we want the district to engage, right? And so we then are representative, we get to go and sit on these and not contribute though, but just listen in, right? And report back on what's happening. But then we do have board committees as well. And to me, that is that's a different lane. That's the way that the board then can engage with community for the sake of board work. And I guess when I look at a lot of the Standard 5, that is how I have viewed it in my mind, is the more of the, I guess Standard 3 is like the district committees, and Standard 5 is like board committees. Does that make sense? Like with this, yeah. I think that's how I viewed it. So I think I think we get to determine that and figure that out. That's what I've kind of been told. But I think that's the source of my biggest confusion and my, I guess, greatest frustration is kind of coming in and not knowing what exists. And as a teacher, I live by standards, so I have read these over and over and over. And I think it's realizing just right now is the first time that I've realized our interpretation is so different of what these are. Not like it's bad, but I was like, oh, now I understand why all of our conversations have ended in ugh. I get it now. No, not all of that.
It's a beautiful moment when it all comes together. And there's room for disagreement or different perspectives on it too. And sometimes that create what I would call kind of creative friction can be helpful. That's right. And they can morph over time and from issue to issue too. Yeah. What did your team talk about?
Okay, we also identified Standard 5 as an area of opportunity for growth, and looking at the historical data, that's been the case for my entirety of my tenure on the board, and I feel like I've had this version of this conversation.
Yes, I bet you have.
A few times. What's that? Yeah, which I guess I got to own a little bit too as a board member that has had this conversation 7 or 8 times now, and there really hasn't been, at least the board's perception, there hasn't been. Well, not only has there not been growth in how we're perceiving ourselves, it's been the other direction. So we also identified sort of the distinction between whether this concept was the work of the board in engaging the community versus the work we expect the district and staff to do. And when I was babbling during our conversation without actually looking at what the specific questions were, and I just went back and looked, and these standards are focused, to me at least when I read them, on the board's engagement with the community, the board's processes for soliciting community engagement, for communicating its decisions. And I think that, and as I reflect, that actually that specific component is where I think there's the most opportunity for growth. I don't have an answer for the how. I'm not an expert in that, but I think that's something we've all collectively identified with our group. What I missed, or inaccurately.
Not missed, but building a little bit on what Lindsay said and what we were also talking about over here. You just said that the district is going a different direction, and I think we all saw that at our last study session. Just even the draft of our community engagement policy is a really big shift for the way that it was very clear to me that that staff has shifted the way that they're thinking about it. Otherwise, they would not have brought a policy that looked anything like that to us. That we have a lot of appetite for changing in that direction and growing in that direction and helping the district grow in that direction. But Lindsay, you said that maybe the district goes that way and we follow. But I think we're here to be leaders, and so I mentioned that. Like the 5 of us in this room are here to be leaders, and I mentioned that here that it's awesome that there's so much appetite in the district to change the way that they're doing things, but I do feel like we should be leading the way, and there's a lot of discussion of the how and what that looks like, but that's not to say that we would be responsible for all communication across the district, but I just have a hard time thinking about how to lead the district through that transformation if we're not at least trying and experimenting, or if we continue to engage with the community in the same way as a board that we always have. It's going to be very hard to lead through that transformation. Yeah, and yes, the distinction is really, really hard, and I think swim lanes is like too. There's a gray area. There's things that are clearly the district's responsibility. There's things that's clearly the board's responsibility. There's a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, it could go either way, but let's engage with that and figure out a way forward, very much hand in hand with the district. I'm not saying we just go off and do our own thing, but that's where I want to go. Sorry, I'm not sure if that related to the self-assessment or any of that, but like to recognize, maybe it's just as Scott and Matt really recognized when they presented the policy to us, this is a really new way of doing things, and we're not going to do it perfectly at first. But we're committed to being leaders. We're committed to the adaptive nature of this work. And I don't know that we've committed to that yet, kind of formally committed to that amongst ourselves.
The Oregon Superintendent's Association has what they call this bright green line, and the board stays on one side of the bright green line, and the superintendent and operations stay on the other. And I have to tell you, in 19 years of board work, I've never seen a green line, bright green line. I think it's more of sort of like this permeable membrane, where sometimes it goes like this. And it depends upon what's going on in the district, the skills of all the people involved, and just kind of what your community demands. So I think you're hitting on some good questions, like what is the responsibility of the district in communication? What is the responsibility of the board? And are those meshing together in a way that is productive as opposed to going like this, where you're working against each other? So I'll be interested in looking at your new policy that your staff has brought forward.
Kind of off of Lisa, that yes, there's the OE3, that is the operational expectation for engagement with community for the district. But then I think also where I'm struggling is like there's this beautiful packet of standards, and then we have our board policies as well, like the governing culture policies, and trying to figure out how these fit in line sorry, with our governing culture policies. And I think when I look at Standard 5, it really gets lumped into a lot of that GC 3.3, and Eric's looking at me like
I was wrestling the same.
yeah, okay. It's the initiate and maintain constructive two-way dialogue with students, parents, guardians, community, and other important stakeholder groups. But it's basically the whole focus of how do we initiate and maintain constructive two-way dialogue. So we have that as our policy, and it's kind of really everything in Standard 5, but I don't think we have that interpretation or like indicators. As we look at what OEs look like, we have more of a directive and an interpretation of what all those mean, and then how do you go about doing that? I don't think we have that in place, and I think it would be, like how you said, like if we were able to set that up on our end, coinciding and leading alongside the OE3 development as well. Sorry, that was just my.
Well, I think where we see the gray area is not a matter of an area where we decide, okay, no, that's you, that's me. I think that's the gray area is where we work together then to try and blend the two, the policy and the administrative, to demonstrate, one, the leadership role of the board, but two, the difference between administrative and policy governance to the public. But again, that gray area is where you end up partnering, I think, as opposed to deciding, okay, well, you do that one and I do that one. That's me.
Did any of you notice that in addition to Standard 5, also Standard 1 had the same number of responses? And one of those is on the back page that's related to following a defined process for gathering input prior to making critical decisions, which of course is community engagement, right? So it's a responsible governance process, but it's also like, what is the board's role in gathering that input? Then there are a couple on page 6. One of them's around orienting new board members, treating all individuals with respect, collaborating with colleagues across the state, and then again, this one is communication related too, providing information to the public that supports board discussions and decisions. So it certainly is an area I think that you all are thinking about and having some desire to improve your own practice. So we're going to take a break here in a few minutes, but I'm going to pivot really quickly to the last question, which will look familiar to those of you who've done this before, and that's those areas where there's some variation across your responses. As it says here, sometimes they look like a rainbow. You know, you'll have a green and a blue and a yellow and a, and a red and maybe even a black thrown in there for fun. But I'd like you, just even where you are right now, or you can move back to your seats if you want, because I'm actually not going to have you move into groups, because you only have 3 out of all of these where you have some significant variation across your responses. And so as I went through, you know, I mentioned at the beginning, yeah, if you want to move back to your seats, you can, or if you're comfy where you are, that's fine. There is only one in all of these responses that it has a standard deviation of 1 or higher, and it is on page 6 on the back page, and it's the 3rd one down. It is question 70, communicate district performance to the public in clear and understandable ways. So you have a 1 to 4 spread. So someone said we never do this, someone said we always do this, and then there are probably some scores in between as well. We can dive into it on there. So then I did drop down to a 0.9, which again isn't a huge amount of disagreement, but it's some. So on that same page, page 6, the second one from the bottom is question 58, ensuring a high degree of coherence between the district plan and school improvement plans. And then the other one is at the very top of page 5, which is question 17, promoting continuous improvement throughout the organization. First of all, I just would like to say to you, it's not very often that I see a board that has such a low number of areas where there's significant difference in your responses. So, I mean, it indicates to me that you are largely all on the same page in terms of your responsibilities and what you think is important as a board. So that's a huge hurdle right there. There are many boards that have lots of these with standard deviations over a 1, and that's hard to overcome because it means there's some real differences in beliefs. So I'm going to just give you just a minute here to, are there some thoughts for you all about that? Yeah, so which one was that? Yep, and that's not surprising that those 53, right? Yeah, so 53 is very much a rainbow. One said, you know, we do this most of the time. One said some of the time. 2 said never. 2 said I don't know. Let's talk about that one for a minute.
I have no idea how I responded, but as I said,
No, we don't want you to out yourself.
I would if I remembered, and if you have the data, you're welcome to. But as I sit here today, I can't remember the last time that the board has seen a school improvement plan.
I'm going to stop you right there.
And if we have, I don't know what is meant by a school improvement plan.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. So, because the board is required to approve all of the school improvement plans, which we do, but we do not have like a discussion around them. They're like added to our agenda, and it's a consent item. So we're going to stop Eric for a second.
Similarly, I don't know what is meant by district plan. Is
And
it?
so I will also say my understanding of it is, just so everyone's on the same page for the school improvement plans, the ones that I've looked at, there is like I don't know if requirement is the right word, but there is an expectation of like a focus by a school and then how it ties back to like the strategic plan. And so from a literal standpoint, I would say that this is a yes. Now, whether or not the board understands that is a completely different question, and then an understanding of what the school improvement plans are, because I do think that we don't spend any time as a board discussing our school improvement. Like, it is a literal check mark, and like my guess is other school districts use school improvement plans differently than we do. But I just, yes, sorry, Eric.
Tell me when you're going to stop me again. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Larry, for reminding me of that. the last part of my paragraph was going to be, this is not actually something I would spend a lot of focus on. Like, I don't view this as, again, and I read it as ensuring, so it's like something active, ensuring a high degree of coherence. I'm fine with how it's at. This is not, for me, like something that needs to be a priority.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think having these things come to the board on consent agenda, not be something that's like on non-consent agenda where we're spending hours as a board debating and going through school improvement plans. That's, to me, like that's a good practice and a good use of time and the right level of focus and the right altitude for the board. So, and I'm just going to keep talking so that Lindsay doesn't have a chance. I'm done. Period.
As a
You
teacher,
just interrupt me, like just tell me. So I'm going to stop you there.
I was indicating that Lindsay is very eager to respond to you.
I feel it's one on this side right here, attacked a little. Thank you.
Feeling a little adversarial just in terms of
Yeah,
the
that's
seating
okay. I think
arrangements.
that's expected. I think I'm just going to start as
Thank you, Eric. Good job.
being an educator in this district and in this state. I am very familiar with the SIP process. So I am familiar with the amount of effort and time and work it goes
SIP,
into.
School
Sorry,
Improvement Plan.
SIP. I am really familiar with the effort that is put into that. And as an educator, I was under the assumption that the board was reviewing these really thoroughly. So on this end, I am a little shocked that we don't, and that it is on the consent agenda. And I have been reading through them all because we do have to approve them on Monday. And it is really interesting and actually answers a lot of questions that I have about R2, because a lot of the goals that schools put in place are really focused on our R2s. And I can see where I have questions about breakdown from some of the data. Lisa pointed this out, like they actually break it down, like it's broken down at that school level, and it helps. I also looked at the slides for the Monday data presentation, and I think it was that like high altitude level is sort of like our R2, but that map level is sort of those SIP plans, and I think it really gives a lot of information and helps reinforce what is in the R2s. I guess I view as the district plan, I guess I think of that as the strategic plan, and then the SIP plans. And I think like, yes, I think there's a point in here, and I was going to try and bring it up where they do focus on that, but I think I don't know if we ensure that that they are connected. I don't know. This was just a whole other connection of what do we do with the SIP plans moving forward?
Yeah, and I'll say I've been familiar with them for a while because the principal at one of my kids' schools really introduced the community to them, which she's supposed to do. That's part of the plan. It feels the altitude question. It feels like that is like on just deep enough to start to make some of the R2 goals more real without getting down to the individual classroom level. But I see differences even across my kids' schools of sort of how I suspect with how they engage with that process. And so I feel like it is a lot. I mean, like, Eric, it's like, I don't know, 300 pages or something for Monday, just FYI.
That's a lot.
It is a lot in a large district, right?
Yes.
We've got a lot of schools.
You do.
It does, I have watched them get approved as a community member on consent year after year after year, and it does seem like there's something more that should be there. And I also interpreted district plan to mean the strategic plan. I feel like we're in a challenging point with the strategic plan at this moment in time, where it was put in place, I believe, pre-COVID and with a different superintendent. I will say before I joined the board, I don't think I was really, like, I guess if you had asked me as a parent, I would have been like, there must be a strategic plan, but I would not have known what was in it, sort of what the process is for developing it. So I think that that's just been challenging, and like there's lots of good reasons why that's been the case for the past few years. But I know that we're actively in the process of putting in place a new strategic plan, and so I'm hoping we can kind of hit the reset button on some of this, get a plan that this board, because I don't know who. It was probably just Eric and Mark who were on the board even when the previous strategic plan was approved. So there's been, just a lot of change, and so I'm looking forward to engaging with that process, getting a plan that we are all really bought into, and then building off of that, because I do think it's super important. And it was interesting being at WASDA and hearing from so many other districts and hearing them talk about their strategic plan as like a real cornerstone of the work that the board was doing. And I don't feel that we are in that place right now for, again, lots of very understandable reasons, but it's definitely something to work on.
Sounds like you're in a transition period. So have you started work on a new strategic plan? Okay, yeah.
This year is the planning year.
Oh, good. In terms of your school improvement plans, there's a fine line, because on the one hand, you do need to be aware of them. But on the other hand, if you dive down too deep, you're really meddling in operational. I mean, no teacher wants the board to say, no, don't do that. You should do this, right? So it's fair for you all, again, to ask your superintendent and his staff for what you need, which might be, could someone share at a high level what is the coherence of these SIP plans across the district? And maybe it's even looking at, like, at an elementary level, what are all of the elementary schools really focusing on as, say, their top 3 priorities? And how about the middle schools, and how about, or even just secondary, elementary and secondary? You can ask for a high-level overview. It does seem unreasonable to me to have you read 300 pages of school improvement plans. It also, frankly, invites meddling in a way that, and you get invested in it because you think, oh, well, what if they? And actually, that's not your job. But it is your job to understand essentially what are your schools focused on as a whole. So you might consider that as something that you could do in the future, so that you understand how are our schools really focusing on what our overall district goals are, and then you'd be able to answer this question for yourselves. And granted, I think what Eric said is really valid too, which is that if everything is the most important, nothing is the most important. So there are some things that you can focus on doing really well, and there might be other things where you say, right now we're not doing that, or that's less important to us overall as a district than these other things, and that's okay. Okay, I'm going to give you a 5-minute break. Sound good? Okay. Grab a muffin, use the restroom, stand up. Started, and we're going to get you out of here at 11. That was the mandate here. I understand someone has a flight to catch, right? So, no, you're good. Did you get that figured out? Time frame? Good. Okay. So we're going to go through this probably a little bit more quickly than I normally would have, because I let you have some more time to talk, because talking is important. You don't get to do that very often at a board meeting, oddly enough. Thank you, OPMA. But it's having conversations like this where you can really dig into some things that really allow you to be an outstanding board that talks about important things. So we're going to go one step deeper on the board self-assessment, which, again, we are now doing with boards who've done this over time and have what I would consider to be some organizational expertise around the work in looking at how you're at what you're looking at. So one of the things WASDA has done over the last couple of years is we've really tried to dial into this, world's largest set of data around school board behaviors and student outcomes, and look at, is there more that the board self-assessment data can tell us about the impact of boards on specific student groups, right? Because we all have specific student groups that are of particular interest to us in our districts. So our researchers spent about a year diving into that data and taking a look at, okay, we've looked at all students. That's what we just looked at. We have some information about that. But then let's look at both students within particular programs or with particular characteristics, and also different race or ethnicity categories. And these are the categories, again, that OSPI uses so that we can use that data from them. So some of the language you might use in your own district might be different, like, might be Latinx, it might be Hispanic, whatever that looks like. So as we dove into this, we had some really high hopes. We're really curious about whether or not there were some specific behaviors that supported specific groups. And here's what we found. Certainly with all students, you've seen that already, there are specific behaviors that support students living in poverty. Unfortunately, we did not find anything specific to students with disabilities. That might be because there's such an array of disabilities, but we're continuing to look into that. That was a disappointment. The research just didn't unearth any particular characteristics there. We did find some correlations with Black students, with Native American students, and with Hispanic Latinx students. Oops, let me get that back there so that you can see that. So that's important to all of you to be able to look at, okay, do we have some students in those groups where we could really dial in and focus our work on them? This is an important one. I know this is a little bit small, but as we look at all students, it's important to look at within the standards. These are the top 5, actually top 6 characteristics of the highest performing districts. So working as an effective and collaborative team, ensuring your non-negotiable goals for student achievement that align with your goals, providing for those learning essentials, that's, creating the conditions for success, of course, adopting and monitoring an annual budget, allocating the money based on district goals for student learning, measuring student academic progress and needs, and then ensuring district information and decisions are communicated community-wide. So you can see all 5 standards are represented there. 3 happens to be represented twice, and that is an area of strength for your board. So let's look at, I'm going to skip past this one just in the interest of time. You cannot read this information. You're not intended to read this information. It's way too small. But I wanted you to look at how the researchers did some of this work, which was thinking about, okay, how do we figure out which behaviors, characteristics, beliefs support certain student groups? So there's a lot of information across this state around specifically Hispanic or Latinx students, because we have a large proportion of them in our state. There are fewer districts, for example, who have reportable numbers for Native American students, but a lot of districts have it for Hispanic students. So you can see where kind of the benchmark is here. The benchmark is somewhere around 50%. So what any of these districts that have a box of red around them, and there are a bunch of different districts here, those are districts that are that their Hispanic students are either outperforming the state, outperforming non-Hispanic students in their district, or both. So you've got a number of them here, and what that tells us is that that's possible. It is possible for Hispanic students, absolutely possible, and we have proof because there are districts in the state doing it, for them to perform at very high levels. So the question the researchers asked was, what are those boards doing? What are those boards doing? And they came up with some really interesting data around that. So what we're going to have you do is we're going to do a couple of things. So first of all, this is super high-level data straight off of OSPI's website, which means it's not detailed at all for your district. But I want you to look at high-level data here. This is the satellite data. I heard you talking about street data earlier. This is the satellite data. And then I'm going to pass another one out to you. And what I want you to do is just take a look at who are your student groups that have the largest gaps. Okay, we're just looking at gaps at a super high level. And let's start with the first one that has the big total student enrollment at the top. It looks like this. Take a look at this. You can look down and you can see, so we've got some race and ethnicity data, and you have program and characteristics. So these are just your percentages of student enrollment. So what do you see here in terms of percentages of specific student groups? Yeah, like for example, I would look under race and ethnicity and say, you know, you have right, or Native American, right? Yes, and that's another conversation for another day. Mark, you're absolutely right. Yes, there's always that question about categorization. It's a hard word to say, but yes. But the vast majority of your students are either white or Asian, right? Okay. How about down below in programs and characteristics? What are some of your larger student groups there? They're really the ones with the bigger orange bar, basically.
Nobody wants to talk. English language learners, low income,
Yep.
highly capable students with disabilities, Section 504.
Yep, those are the ones I would identify. Just in comparison, for example, you have a very small percentage who are homeless, who are migrant, or who are members of military families. Okay, so that just kind of indicates to you, okay, those are some groups that we need to be looking at, right? Okay, so go ahead and take your other paper that you have in front of you. This, again, blunt instrument, because we are looking at the state assessments, but kind of keeping those groups in mind, take a look down these columns, and there's a lot of similarity across from, you know, where you're looking at SBA and where you're looking at math and science. But take a look down here. Where do you see some big achievement gaps? Within which student groups do you see some big achievement gaps? Yep. Yes, absolutely. How about within ethnicity? Yeah, so within areas where you have a significant, so again, just recognizing every student is important, of course, and as a district, you want to be looking at where do we have larger student groups that have larger gaps, right? Because you make more of an impact. And I think really that group is probably Hispanic students, right, for your district? Feel free to disagree or jump in. Okay, so that's kind of a really rough framing for you all, is you kind of know where, so as you look at this sheet, what I highlighted here is the groups that you might want to work on making some progress in and really focus on would be Hispanic students, English language learners, low-income students, and students with disabilities. Those kind of the big four for you? Okay. So now, yes, go ahead, Mark.
We had the highly capable over in the first page. And unless I'm just skipping over it by my eyes, they don't characterize that. And I'm assuming because it's off the map, overachieving. But it's interesting that we have that small percentage by comparison, that's about the size of the low income, or less than the low income, less than a little bit more than disabilities. But yet, there seems to be an inordinate amount of focus on them. I mean, that's because of the expectations. I don't know. I'm just not seeing. Well, I'm not seeing it over here.
Right, yeah, yes. Your point is that you have a large group of them in your district, but you're not seeing their assessment scores over here. And that's a really good point. I don't know whether they aren't pulled on this particular report. I know I went over to look on the back too. I didn't think I'd missed one. Yeah, good question. So you'd want to probably, you'd want to take a look at that specific data for your own district.
We have that data internally.
Yeah.
I was just looking at it.
You have lots of data internally. Again, this is really high level. This is a blunt instrument, and yet it can tell you something. So keeping this in mind, take your ranking survey back in front of you, put it next to that, that report that we were just looking at. And I want you to look over in the far right-hand column that we didn't talk about before. So this research identified those high leverage indicators. So again, it was, what are these boards doing that has a high correlation with student success of this subgroup? Okay, so what you're looking at on the screen right now, that was the Hispanic students, but we're also going to be looking at it for other student groups as well. So let me give you the key to this. So as you look down on the first page, about halfway down, the P is for students in poverty. And then turn to page 2. BD stands for overall boardsmanship. That's really just all students. We should just have it say all, but that's all students. So that's a particular high leverage indicator that has a high correlation between board actions and student outcomes. Again, P is poverty. The next one down, H is Hispanic. And I'm just looking to see if you have some others here. Oh, yes. Let's see. So what we've got here is N is Native American. And B is Black students. And I think that covers all of the student groups here. So, yes, ma'am.
The reason why there's not disabilities as well is because you had said that there was no way to determine from, like, there was no, back to the slide with lots of the arrows.
So let me state it for you.
Okay, thank you.
It's not that there's no way to determine, it's that this research did not identify any with a high enough correlation to have us say with certainty it's a high leverage indicator. I've learned to say these correctly, or the researchers spank me. I get my hand slapped occasionally if I don't say it correctly. It doesn't mean we're not looking still. We are. This is still an area of great interest to us. So, again, we only have about 20 minutes left. So it's up to you whether you want to get into a couple of small groups to discuss this, or if you want to do this here. But as you look down, so just as an example, so you know, you do have students living in poverty as one of your student groups, and they do have a large gap. So as you look down on this first page, about halfway down, question number 36, having policies for evaluating staff based on student success. That's a high leverage indicator for students in poverty. Go ahead.
Sorry. That was also the one that three of us said we don't know what that means.
Yes.
So are you able, like, is that up for interpretation, or are you able to tell us what does that mean? Have policies for evaluating staff. When it says staff, what does that mean according to WASDA self-assessment?
So yeah, it's a really good question. I appreciate you continuing to bring that up about, I appreciate you bringing that up. It's important. It's important to look at all of the elements there. And again, that's not uncommon with some new board members at all. But also there might be some current board members who said that too. Because, yeah, I think we have some policies that say that, but how those are being carried out. So there are a lot of different ways that people can interpret this. Okay, what are those policies? Number one, where are they? What are they? Number two, how are they actually being operationalized within the district? Both of those are very valid questions. All of staff, including superintendent. Now, but your relationship is different with the superintendent than it is with the rest of staff, because you actually evaluate your superintendent, and your superintendent is responsible for ensuring that all the rest of staff is evaluated. But you have a district-wide responsibility.
Can anyone answer that? Do we have policies evaluating staff based on student success? Like, are our teachers evaluated based on student scores?
Do we as a board have policies?
Are there board policies? Are our teachers being evaluated?
We don't have a board policy that calls for that. We do not specifically, Leah will tell me if I'm wrong again. I'm going to go and walk out on the ledge anyway. To my knowledge, we do
You're not
not
gonna make
have
eye
a
contact
board
with
policy that calls for evaluation of teachers, for example, based on that data.
So,
May that be, maybe, is that implicit in some of the policies? I'd have to scrutinize them.
okay, so
But I don't think so.
is this then saying that for students in that poverty classification, that having policies for evaluating staff is beneficial to improving their scores?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Well, and to clarify, it's that the boards evaluated themselves highly on having policies. So it goes back to the board interpretation.
the board is ensuring that there are policies and practices within the district to evaluate staff. Now, your question is, do we have them? It's more than just policy. I mean, there's state law, like the TPEP initiative. So it's the teacher evaluation system, which is mandated across the state. So your principals and superintendent are responsible for ensuring that TPEP evaluations take place for every staff member in the district. So it's a really simple question that has many, many layers. But I think the way I would quantify it is that you as a board are ensuring that through the superintendent, those are happening. That staff, and sometimes it's just, again, the power of a question. Like, what is the evaluation system for our teachers, for our paraprofessionals, for our principals? What does that look like? It's a big question, but it also is the start of a conversation.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, the board can press with those questions. And sometimes that takes place, in a work session where you're saying, we really don't know what these look like. Where are those policies? Which ones are the policies? And then how does the district operationalize them? It's the same as the communication issue. What do our policies say around communication, and how are both the board and the district operationalizing them? Does that make sense? Yeah. These are thorny questions, and none of these are easy issues, because you're talking about layers of people before you get to the students, and you're at that top layer. Right? So what I'd like you to do is take a... There you go. Do you need to turn it back on and clarify? You're good. So So again, we only have about 10, 12 minutes, but I'd like you to just sort of scan through this area and again, think a little bit about, so you identified your your Hispanic students, your English language learners, which are called multilingual learners now, low-income students, and students with disabilities aren't going to show up on here. So you're looking at Hispanic and multilingual learners and low income. What do you see in terms of, so anytime one of those appears in that right-hand column, that's a high leverage indicator. So for example, at the top of page 2, question 61, regularly reviewing data, including disaggregated student achievement. That is a high leverage indicator for all students, and also particularly for students living in poverty. So it's a good thing that you said, we are doing that. We as a board are doing that. And then, I'd recommend you take a look at those where maybe you rated yourselves a little bit lower. And one of them that you talked about on the very back page is ensuring that degree of coherence between your strategic plan and your school improvement plans. And that's an important one for students living in poverty. Which mean?
That one, and then like our highest one and the lowest one, I feel like we don't really know what that means. Right,
Yep.
Policies for evaluating staff. Do we? And then the disconnect between the school improvement plans and strategic plans. Like there's a lot of, that one also had two people say it, right? So it might just be us, or it might just be sometimes it's not as clear cut.
I will also point out the obvious, which is that your superintendent isn't here today because of a personal difficulty. And if he were, he could shed some light on some of those things. And so I would make sure that you make some time to, sit down with John in a work session or whatever that looks like with your superintendent and talk about some of those questions, because he has some of the context around that could be, we're missing that context today. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the problems, too, when we get to the smaller populations, as we start to ask for data on the smaller populations, we're told that, well, it's such a small population that if you disaggregate it, then all of a sudden you're getting to your violation of privacy.
They're suppressed.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yes, and so that's true. But you also have some subgroups that are large enough, which is why I asked you first to identify which are your larger groups, and then which are among those groups are the ones where you have gaps. Every student counts, and you also as a board need to really focus on where are the large groups where we also have a large gap. Yeah. I'll give you just a minute or two to take a look through these briefly, and then you've got 10 minutes or so for some conversation if you want, and then we're going to wrap up. Does anything stand out to you in terms of either all students or low-income students or Hispanic students?
Yeah, I've flipped immediately to the last page, like where are we doing the worst, I guess.
Opportunities for growth.
Thank you. I was looking for
you're
the kind way that, yes, it's usually, yes, where are our greatest opportunities? And sort of the indicators that line up with, there's on the very last page, so the areas of greatest opportunity. There's two indicators for students experiencing poverty, one of which we already talked about, and then one that is high leverage for Latino students as well as all students. And they all come back to kind of, well, no, they don't all come back to one thing, but there's not a solid theme there, actually, because it's publicly recognized the efforts of schools in improving student learning, communicating district performance to the public in clear and understandable ways, and then the one we just talked about, the coherence between the district plan and the school improvement plans. So, thinking about whether those are, areas that we might want to focus on a little bit more. And the communicating to the public is an interesting one, because I think that, ties in really well with some of the policy work that we're doing, and that might just give us another lens to look at the work that we're doing around communications and community engagement, to say, like, we're not just doing this because we haven't revised this policy since 2012, or because, I don't know, we've got 2 outspoken new board members who are pushing us to do that, but because it actually connects to student achievement.
All 3 of those have some connection to your community. What else do you see?
I think it's interesting. It's a different way to look at the data. And I think it's also an indication of kind of where we are at as a board in terms of our collective knowledge, and not necessarily where the district is at. So I think that there is an opportunity here for potentially, I mean, granted, Lindsay has been in her role for 2 months now, and Lisa, you've 5 months now. And so, like, this is, I think that it's expected, some of the questions, obviously, and an understanding of kind of where we're at and what we're doing. And, like, 2 years, I still have tons of questions. And so, sorry. And so I think in terms of, like, an opportunity for growth, looking at the areas where we really had not disagreement, but different interpretation, and sitting down and trying to be on the same page, I think would also be helpful, so that we can actually pinpoint whether or not is this really an opportunity for growth for the district and the board, or is it just we need to do better collective learning so that we can then focus on actual needle movers for us.
And that's really great work to do as you're launching into a strategic planning process. So you're at a good point for that. Okay, Eric, I'm going to pick on you. You've been here for a while. What do you see? What stands out to you in terms of looking at these high leverage indicators? Anything? Well, okay, yeah, but I will return to it because, again, you all, it's important for you to understand, like, what is your role with those school improvement plans?
Yeah, I have been sort of thinking about, what does that mean to me?
It's on. Oh, I thought it was.
And, what would that look like? Reading, well, if this is something that we want to do as a board, having it as a consent agenda item that we maybe pull from, what we have in place isn't doing that, I think, is fair to say. Or maybe it is, I don't know. But,
Well, it's difficult to get through a 300-page report that's just on the consent
and
agenda.
then I get through and I don't like what it says, like for not to pick on Sandburg Elementary, but that's the one I went to immediately because that's where my kids go to. Okay, so I think that there's discoherence there. How do I ensure, I still think we have like a process to think about that. And I think like at the school by school level is probably not the best way for the board to ensure that there is a high degree of coherence. I don't have a solution for it, but it's interesting. And it is interesting for me because it is, I guess the research indicates it's something that boards that have had success in moving the needle with low-income students have done. or perceive they have done, which is interesting too. Can I keep talking for one
Sure.
more? Okay.
I'm going to give everybody a chance to talk.
I just-
and
that
then
was
we'll
a
wrap
question
up
for
today.
Communicate district performance to the public in a clear and understandable way. So as I reflect on what we as a board have done, the board has, that's been staff driven, I guess, as I would say, the communication of performance. I mean, we have monitoring reports where it's the staff is presenting it. I don't think the board has done a lot of actively communicating district performance. And that's why I was sort of wrestling with what does this mean and what does that look like.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that one because not only is that one where you rated yourselves lower, but it also has the highest degree of incoherence with each other.
Yes.
The scores were all across the board on that one. So there is not a common understanding of what that means within your board. So it's worthy of delving into more as a team.
Yes, maybe.
It also is a high performance indicator not only for Hispanic Latino students, but in fact for all students.
Yes.
Do you, anything else you want to add? Lindsay's chomping at the bit. I want to make sure that you're okay.
Well, I guess so. Just to put a point, put a conclusion to my paragraph. When I was thinking about the work, when I was sort of thinking, okay, as a board, we need to do some work around what it means for us to engage with the community. This was not something in my mind that I had identified as an area of focus. So I'm just, that's why I'm sort of wrestling with it. I'm trying to think about why I didn't identify it, and then should it be something that would be an area of focus.
So it's a new consideration potentially in that community engagement piece.
Yeah, I guess I just don't know what it means. Like, is it the board saying like these are, we as a board need to communicate to the public, trumpet our success, the successes of the district, meaningfully, or is the board, are we thinking the board should be communicating our results to the community? I don't know. And then the why, like why is that? I'm just having a hard time sort of wrestling with why is that something that would drive, be a high leverage indicator for these districts.
Well, I think it is part of the community feeling like they are invested in their schools and in their schools' outcomes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Lindsay, did you want to weigh in? And then we'll just go around and then we'll wrap up.
Just quickly, when you say like that's a great thing to dive into, when do we dive into that? When do we dive into all of this?
We would have to make the time, make the conscious decision and make the time to dive into it. So study sessions, extended study sessions. I don't think this is something you do on the dais.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so.
Because I think that's what I'd be interested in is like this brings to light so much and really highlights where everyone is thinking differently. And if we just go and leave today and take that, then without having a plan of, okay, when do we actually do that work? I just worry that we'll be back here in a year doing the same thing. That's what I worry about.
I will summarize my notes and provide those to your board officers and also to Superintendent Holman. Yeah. No, that's not true. Talking is good in a work session.
Just general.
Boardsman, yeah, yeah, it's general boardsmanship. Lisa, how about you? Anything? Last words, final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was pondering that question of why. I think that this is really helpful for this conversation has been really helpful for identifying specific places. I do agree with Lindsay that we need to, it's not enough just to identify like, oh, we have a really wide spread on this one question that apparently has a lot of impact on all students. But then having the plan to actually, having narrowed down 70 plus questions to a handful that could probably make the biggest impact. And the why of why that might make a difference. I was just pondering that. We just had community connectors on Wednesday, and it was super interesting. It went in some directions I was not expecting, but that were incredibly valuable to me as a board member. Maybe really frustrating to the community members who were part of it. Like to summarize really briefly, a huge part of the conversation basically came back to R3. And I could see that connection having monitored R3 and, being familiar with its contents. But, I was in a room full of community members who weren't, clearly weren't aware of it. So are we communicating district performance, which is not just academic performance, because we do have R3, which is not strictly academic results. But yeah, it was not communicated. It clearly had not landed with community members in a clear and understandable way. And I do see that over and over where when we're not grounded in the realities of where we're at, that it makes it really hard to have conversations about where we want to go as a district. So I can absolutely. Sorry, I was focusing in on that particular question. That's not really a wrap-up thought. It's more of a rat hole. But yeah, I do think that some of these are really critical. Yeah, and sorry, I'm a bit all over the place, but I did also just want to throw in that I missed one of the other areas of greatest opportunity.
There you go.
I'll get it. Provides information to the public that supports board discussions and decisions, which is a high leverage indicator for all students and students experiencing poverty.
To the bottom of page 5.
Coming back to that theme of community engagement. Maybe that is my wrap-up thought, is that it seems like there's just a lot of work to be done in that area, and thinking about I think we're on that path already, but this gives me some greater clarity of some real places where we should probably focus our efforts to get better coherence as a board, and then all the way down to some of the student groups that we're most concerned about.
Good, thank you. That did end up being a good wrap-up, as it turned out. Good job. Mark, how about you? What are you thinking now?
Well, going back to the SIP question, I liked your idea of going to the elementary, middle, and high school SIP and doing an analysis of it in that manner, so you're not getting into the weeds of the individual schools, individual teachers, and perhaps looking at where do we need to improve and how we are going to improve in those various areas. I'm wondering if perhaps, I don't know if it's possible with the SIP, if we also look at that in our areas, whether it's poverty, Hispanic, so forth, how being able to monitor plans in that respect. I think it's going to be interesting to see what we come up with in regards to how we communicate, because I think there's a wide disparity of viewpoints on how we communicate, when we communicate, who does the communication. Is it a team activity as opposed to just staff? Is putting it out on the website sufficient, or is it really dialogue? I hate to say two-way dialogue. To me, that's redundant. But anyway, that's my thought.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think getting back to that idea of the SIP plans. I mean, I think it's a question for your superintendent. Like, what would this look like for us to have a high-level overview? It might be by school level. There might be some other ways that he thinks would be more appropriate for that overview. Yeah. Okay, Leah, you get to bring us home.
I guess I have a question, and that is WASDA able to advise on
So going back to like SIP plans, I think probably school differents utilize them in different ways.
For sure.
And I'm curious, in terms of it being a high leverage indicator for a school district, I'm curious if those schools are utilizing them in a different way than we are. And it's like, is WASDA able to kind of bridge that knowledge gap for us potentially? Because if I think about the range in sizes of our school districts in this state,
Yeah.
and potentially the various governance models and kind of all of the potential differences, I'm curious to see, is this actually, or how do we know if it's worth the effort and the time? Like, will this be a high leverage indicator for a district of our size? And that's just an example. I'm not saying like that specifically, but when I look at some of these, that question pops up. And I don't know if that's something that we can work with WASDA with to figure out potentially like what the high leverage indicators for our district in particular would be to help us narrow our focus to try to, impact our outcomes.
Do you want me to answer that, and then you can do your
Yeah.
next one? So, I don't have a clear understanding of how districts across the state look at their school improvement plans. There are a lot of examples of data that I gather and samples from districts. Like I have a whole range of board operating protocols and a whole range of board annual calendars. But I don't know the answer to your question about how obviously a school district with 3 schools is going to do them differently than a district with 50 schools. There's just, you'd have to do that differently. So it's a good question. It's one I wrote some notes down on to see if I can gather some detail around that.
Yeah. And then, I think I just re-articulate the thing I said before, which is this is pretty helpful in terms of trying to figure out where our board is as a collective and the areas that we potentially need to just focus conversation around and collective learning around. So moving forward, I think this is it's a good tool for us to get there, to be on the same page so that we can move forward together. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I'll wrap it up for you then. I would encourage you not just to look at those on the back pages, but also to really dig into the middle. Now I'm going to stay on my soapbox there. But again, really look on pages 3 and 4. There are a lot of them, a lot of high leverage indicators for students living in poverty and Hispanic Latinx students there. And so those are some areas where you're not starting from a place of deficit. You're like, oh, we're doing pretty well here. How could we just nudge it a little bit higher? And because that's an easier movement. So I really appreciate you spending your Saturday morning with me and with each other and diving into some important questions.
Thank you so much. On our agenda, we do have another topic for discussion, which was our board summary process and public comment. I think that we are going to table that for another time. We have a board member that needs to get to the airport, and we would like to be cognizant of that. So for now, I think we will move to adjourn this meeting. Since there are no other agenda items, the February 3rd, 2024 study session is now adjourned at, that clock is wrong, 11:10 a.m. Thank you, everybody.